Good afternoon, Senolo. How are you? Hello, Senolo. Can you hear me? Hello, Senolo. Senolo. Hello, Senolo. Can you hear me? All right, great stuff. Thank you for joining this virtual class. I believe this is the HBET 230. Thank you for joining this class once again. I just want us to start with a general recap of what we covered in the previous lessons before we get to the quintessential parts of this particular lesson. Remember, on our previous lessons, we covered the general recap of the module as well as the assessment briefs. Now, if you can remember, you have a F1 assessment that is due on the 1st of April 2022. This should be due then by 12 o'clock midnight, where remember your cover page must be included, your music cue sheet file, as well as your references included on this cover page. So the quintessential parts of the brief then was citizen journalism. Now, if you can remember, citizen journalism involved private individuals who are normally the consumers of journalism. So the objective of this assessment, then you are tasked to produce a 4 to 5 minute news or human interest story to be filmed within a 5-kilometer radius of the Boston Media House campus. This story that you are then tasked to produce then can be breaking news that is happening live, or it can be a coverage of a developing story, but it must be newsworthy or interesting. If you can remember, Tenolo, when we spoke about newsworthiness, we spoke about the 3 things. Do you remember those 3 things, Tenolo? Tenolo? Can you still remember those 3 things when we spoke about what we mean when we say something is newsworthy?
It is supposed to be interesting, thought-provoking, and accurate and truthful.
Yes, yes, definitely. That's what we spoke about when we spoke about something that is newsworthy and interesting. Yes, definitely. We spoke about the 3 elements, which we'll touch then again with regards to your pitch. We spoke about data, we spoke about the impact as well as the emotion. Those then form into what we call a thought-provoking or newsworthy content, but we'll get into that later on. Remember, you may cover this story as an individual or as a group of people, right? But it should not be a sports report or something that is actually happening in the mainstream media that has already been covered. So then you make an original content piece that hasn't been covered in the mainstream media, as well as your story then needs to be uploaded on your YouTube channel, as well as a link to be provided. Do you follow that, Tanuka?
Yes, sir.
And then the color coding system of your entertainment product should be PAL. The frame rate must be 25 frames per second. The aspect ratio should be 16:9. That's if you are shooting with a smartphone, right? 16:9. You can't shoot then on a portrait because it's a film. And then the resolution should be 920x180. Codec should be H.264. All right. And then with regards to the YouTube requirements, I just want to go through this thing one more time with you guys before we get into it, right? With regards to the YouTube channel requirements, your group name should also be the name of your channel. Remember that. You must also have a descriptive title of your video. Then you must also include a video description. This is including the official assessment title. You must credit all the music. If you're going to be using unlicensed music or music that you got from the internet free of charge, then it also must be referenced and credited on your entertainment piece. Then you must type the name of your channel as well as your URL for the specific video at the bottom of your reference list so that it's easier for me then to go and check it out on the news, on the platform that you'd be sending it on. So you can't use any copyrighted music. Make sure that you get the music licenses from the creativecommons.org licenses. That's where you can get free licenses, or you can go to a website called Arctic. Arctic also has like great forms of music that you can use there, and then also make sure that you credit that the composers or the music creators. And then we spoke about the 5 mediums of communication in television production, which we covered in the previous lessons, which include narrative, performance, medium, aesthetics, as well as control. And we spoke about how control then fits in with the 3 stages of production, which is mainly pre-production, production, as well as the post-production. We spoke about the dangers and effects of plagiarism, both as a student and in the industry. So that's why we need you to reference, because when you don't reference, then we find traces of plagiarism, then we subtract 50% from your project. And then we spoke about setting up lighting using the 3-point lighting technique, but we can do that during contact lessons so that I can get to show you guys and capacitate you guys more into that. We spoke about budgeting. I showed you guys how to do a budget. Do you still remember how to do that, or should we go through that as well?
I still remember.
You still remember, great stuff. And then we spoke about the 3-act structure. So those are one of the fundamental things that we spoke about, as well as using the studio as well. The studio booking times from Monday, Wednesday, as well as Friday. So those are the things that I wanted to then highlight before we get to the quintessential parts of this lesson. So on this lesson, Tinola, I wanted to talk about pitching as well as funding bodies that exist in South Africa. So the funding bodies that exist in South Africa, we have the National Fund, Nfvf, we have Gauteng Film Commission, but we'll get to the Nfvf right now. I'll just show you how to do this and how to submit so that you get to align yourself into why you are then producing, why it's important to pitch, why it's important to write these budgets, and the requirements that the industry then needs in these funding bodies. We have BASA, Business Arts SA, DTI, as well as your private investors, crowdfunding and fundraising. There's millions of ways to actually get funding for your entertainment piece before you get into the production stage. Now, I want us to get into the pitching element, like before we get into the interview, and then I'll quickly share my screen with you to show you how that is done. What do you find to be, what do you call pitching? What do you understand to be pitching?
I think pitching is telling a story or telling a story that you want to execute in like film or yeah.
Definitely you're on the right track. So when you pitch something, so a movie pitch or a television pitch is when a screenwriter or a director, a person such as you, Chinelo, presents an idea for a film feature to then people who can help finance or to produce it in hopes of securing a lot of money, maybe a sum of money for your first draft. There's the first draft, the second draft, as well as the third draft. So the pitch is basically a process that is meant to intrigue people who can help you make your movie a reality. This can be a studio executives, film distributors, directors to sign onto your particular project. So this film pitch of yours then can be a draft of the final film. So they are useful tools that briefly convey the important elements of a project, like the premise, as well as the characters, the plot, the budget, and why you believe it's actually important to be making that particular film. Remember, when you pitch, let me just share my screen with you so that we can revise before you actually pitch. Tell me when you can successfully see when I've shared my screen. Can you see something there?
Not yet.
Can you see?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So remember, when you pitch and developing your concept idea, we spoke about 3 things: data, impact, as well as emotion. Now, this is also in reference to your citizen journalism, as well as conceptualizing your idea, thinking about narrative, as well as pre-production. So data, ask yourself, before you pitch something, pitching is actually selling your product, selling yourself. When you pitch, you actually sell your product to yourself first before you can sell it to other people. It's very imperative to say, okay, then my data. Data is information that involves your entertainment product. Ask yourself, what about this concept is unique? Why is it experimental? Why should it be done? And what makes it so important that people should fund it? What is it? Think about it when you think about data. When? Who's going to watch your show? Think about your target audience. Who's going to watch your show? For what purpose and what value does it then bring to humanity or the people? Who are the characters for your show? Who is going to be watching it? Why do you believe that it's important? Where is it taking place? What is the setting of your story? When is it actually taking place? Why do you believe that that period is important in sharing your concept? So this is when you develop your concept and start thinking about these things, as well as when you pitch into the pitching element to say, okay, my story takes place in Johannesburg. This is the period when South Africa is not stable. This is what's going on during the war between Russia and Ukraine, whatever the case may be. This is the period and the setting. Think about those things. Why? There's the why element. Why should the story be told? Why should it be funded? What is the impact on the society? Think about the impact. Does it have economic impact on your target audience? What is the social impact on your target audience? What is the political impact of your target audience? Does it have a spiritual element? If your entertainment piece is mainly a religious stream or a spiritual kind of driven narrative, how does it impact people spiritually? So scientific, is it scientific? When you think about these things, when you think about data and you think about information of where you obtain to start thinking about your project, think about the impact, social impacts, the educational factor, the psychological factor with regards to tying in your entertainment piece to your particular product. When you think about emotion, think about the solution. Remember, when you make an entertainment piece such as this one, especially citizen journalism, think about the problems and think about the solution. What is the solution that, or the premise that your entertainment piece is actually there to actually solve? So which problem is it actually solving? Is it solving an economic problem? Is it solving a social problem? Is it bringing it to light? Is it exposing it? Is it scientific? What discovery is it actually thinking along those lines? So I want you to, when you start developing your concept idea and pitching it, as well as your page, start thinking about these three elements, because they then drive and guide you in terms of pitching. And who, remember we spoke about who when it comes to data and collecting information. So collecting information and data, I'll come back to emotion. You can use different sources like we spoke. You can use the internet, you can use Wikipedia, which is a great link for sources of information. There's Statistics SA, which is free. You can log into that. There's surveys, which you can conduct, interviews, personal interviews, which you then subscribe or transcribe into a script to then collect the data to think about, to answer the who element. Who would watch your show and who can be changed by it? What emotion does it then drive to then developing that thing, your entertainment piece? So those are some of the elements that I wanted to share then with you before we get to the quintessential parts of pitching and the funding bodies. Remember earlier on I spoke about funding bodies like the Nfvf, right? Have you ever heard of the Nfvf before?
Yes, sir.
Have you applied?
Yet?
You haven't?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so let's go to the website. I just want to show you how to do that, because it's very necessary to know how to do these things so that you can also start applying for your future film projects, as well as other projects, personal projects that you want to then pursue. So these are the reasons why we want you to know how to pitch, know how to write the budget from the pre-production up until the final production stage, know why it's important to write the treatment. So then this is the Nfvf. So when you go to the Nfvf website, it'll land you here by the home page, right? So in the home page, there's about the Nfvf, where you get to learn about it, the SAFTAs, funding, filmmakers, SA films, festivals and markets, how you can participate, as well as the research that is necessary for you to be able to know what kind of landmark are you moving into, what kind of general and economic specific impact can your film have on the general overview of filmmaking? So let's go to funding. As you can see, there's funding overview and criteria. There's market and distribution, production funding, festival hosting, development funding, festival attendance. Let's go to development funding. We'll just click into that so that I can show you how these things are done. So now when you go to these film development funding, it shows you, okay, who is eligible to apply, what is their requirements, as well as what development funding is. Remember, we spoke about pre-production, we spoke about the development funding. So development funding comes when it's the second part or the principal photography of production. So just read for me this part here, Lerato, where it says development funding. What is this? So then the Nfvf considers development as any work undertaken to put an idea or concept into writing. This is where the treatment comes in. With an intention of creating a script, including research undertaken. Remember, we spoke about data, motion, as well as the impact undertaken in a documentary, a short feature, as well as a fiction, whether it's fiction or real life. So this is what development funding is all about. Now, the Nfvf also provides financial support to the development of television concepts that can be formatted, sold globally, and licensed for remake rights or for syndication. Now we go to who is then eligible to apply. Okay, we see here it's independent production companies who hold exclusive rights or options to at least 12 months, or writers attached to a particular project. So it's also imperative, Loretta, to know that start thinking along the lines of opening a production company, even if it's registering it, because these are things that they would then need, these funding bodies or organizations, as well as donors and funders into the media space, to be in a position to finance your project. Because sometimes then, unlike the NAC or the National Arts Council, it's not only limited to you coming as an individual saying, I represent myself and this is the project that I want to do. Then they want to see a company that is attached to your name. So start thinking about opening a production company. It's 165, you register it and you start operating under it. So then writers attached to a project. If you're a writer of this particular project, your citizen journalism, then you can also eligible to apply. What are the funding requirements or the application requirements? Okay, you need a completed form, a letter of motivation, as well as synopsis. We spoke about what the synopsis is. The synopsis is basically a general overview of what your script is about, which entails the narrative aspect, the performance aspect, the period, the settings, the genre, the emotional relevance, how much it costs, and so forth. The treatment chain and title and proof of copyright where the work is not an original idea. Remember last time we spoke about intertextual referencing, where you are taking an original idea and you're sampling it from a different idea. So if it's not an original piece, then you need to have what we call a copyright chain treatment to say, okay, then I've got licenses from this particular project, and then they've given me a leeway to create something similar to that or intertextual to that. That's what you need. But in your case, then, because it's a simple produced product by yourself, and you just then need to then fill out a treatment that you have compiled. So we need a producer CV, a writer CV. If you've got a producer on set, those are things that you start thinking about. You write your own comprehensive CV, Lerato. Those are things that we need to start thinking about, because your CV then also, before we get to your narrative, before we get to your budget, before we get to your treatments, we need to know what kind of person we're dealing with, what kind of projects are they used to, what factors have they put into the entertainment products, who are we actually putting our money into. So your CV is basically your resume and your profile to actually let funders know what you're about and so forth. So the development fundings, overheads, characters, narrative treatment, target audience, and distribution plan. We spoke about that. Distribution plan. What is your distribution plan? Where are you going to be distributing it on YouTube? Do you have plans of going to Netflix? Those kind of things. So target audience. Remember when we spoke about target audience, we remembered, okay, if my target audience are children or they are teenagers or they are people in the academic space, then you need to clarify that because most people misinterpret their target audience with their peers. So when you make an entertainment piece, know and understand that my target audience is not necessarily my peers. I could make an entertainment piece targeted at elderly citizens living in poverty in South Africa. I could target them at economically marginalized people living from the ages of 35 to 45. I could be targeting those kind of people, and that's what my entertainment piece is about. So it's important to clarify that also when you pitch and also in your treatment. A track record of the production company where applicable, okay, company registration document and so forth. TV format applications also require the concept outline and so forth, universal dramatic theme, format, development plan, longevity of the concept, legal protection, and copyright. Okay, cool. Now we're going into the link to see actually how you go about applying for this thing. So you just then click on the Nfvf link there to apply because now you are eligible for an application. So I'll just go into mine here. Are you still with me, Larato?
Sir, there's no Lerato.
I'm sorry, I keep calling you Lerato. Okay.
Tsenulo.
Tsenulo. Where do we keep? Yes. There's two participants.
Yes, sir.
Yes, yes. So are you guys still following? Okay, and I'm sorry I keep saying Lerato. Lerato was
yes.
I'm sorry about that. So we'll then go. What's nice about the Nfvf as well as they give out bursaries as well. So if you want to apply for an international bursary to go overseas and national bursaries for maybe Boston medias, then they're in a better position to then finance those things. So as you can see here, this is an application. So on top here, there's applicant details, company details, filming details, budgeting, as well as uploads. So these are all the documents that you then need to upload for then your funding to be eligible. So applicant details then ask you, okay, this is for development and production. Okay, sector group is production. Tier 2, remember we spoke about the 3 tiers that are eligible for development, for funding. The first one is for major established, tier 1 is for major established companies that have produced over 5 to 10 films. Tier 2 is for up and coming new market, new leaders into the development space or students into the film production and television production. The third one is people who have actually produced 1 or 2 films. So these are the tiers that they are actually replying. Now, when we speak about application contact details, then they'll ask you for your contact details, your first name, then you put in there Tsenolo, your second name, your surname, your email address, your landline, your numbers, your initials, all these things. So this is your details as you would fill in any sort of application. Now you go here, there's project. If you're still following me, the name of your project, you put in, if your name of your project is, let's say, Boston Cats or Real Dogs of Santon or whatever the name of your journalism piece is, or Sober Judgment, for lack of a better word, then you put it here, which province, Gauteng, you put in there, application declaration, so forth. So this is the first component of when you start applying for funding. And this also is applicable to when you apply for bursaries as well. So then we go to the second one, which is company details, right? We then click onto it. Company details, if you've got a company, you put in your company details here, the synopsis of the profile, the number of employees, permanent people, BEE, are they African colored employees, senior executives, members, and so forth. So this is basically like a synopsis of everybody who is involved in your production. This is also necessary when they need company details because they want to know what kind of company they're investing their money into. Is it a viable company? Is it actually making an economic difference? Are there people actually employed in this company? Is it a multi-diverse company where we're not only saying, okay, only a specific class of people can then apply for funding? Okay, it's diverse. We have colored people, white people, black people. It's all an interracial kind of a thing, which means it speaks to the greater part of the economic and social political regions into economic factors. Now, we'll move into the filming details. Genre. right? We spoke about genre, what your genre is about. In this case, it was a political adventure, right? We spoke about the log line as well. What is a log line? A log line is basically a 1 sentence that actually sells your production. It's like a slogan of some sort to actually hook the funders to, so to speak. In this case, the log line is when wise men pursue silence, errors are mistaken for wisdom, sober judgment. So that's a log line that would catch people. Okay, when wise men pursue silence, errors are mistaken for wisdom. That's a nice thing to start hooking the clients, to start hooking. Okay, if it's a political genre, then I can understand why the log line is in that way. Right, the role. Who is your role? If it's Tenolo, you write Tenolo, your surname, your contact numbers, and so forth. If you have international people working on your product, then you can attach their profiles here. The shooting, video, obviously HD if you're shooting in HD, if you're shooting in a camera, and so forth. We're done with that. Now we're going to the budget, right? Are you guys still with me?
Yes, sir.
All right, cool. So then they'd ask you here previous submissions. Have you then been funded by the Nfvf? If yes, then you say yes. What was the project submitted? Was the project then submitted for development? You write yes or no. Was the project summarized? They'd ask you questions with regards to your application. When you go to copyright, okay, the applicant must be the originator of the script. So you can't be then submitting for funding if you're not the original creator of the script. If you're submitting as a group, then everybody's CV must be attached to this particular funding document, right? Is this your original idea? Is it a true life story? Does it represent the real characters or not? What is the underlying work? Is there third-party content? Who's involved? And so forth. Are you aware of any claims against control or ownership of the rights? Say yes or you say no, depending on what your production is about. The funding amount, in this case, it was 650,000. Let's say you're looking for, let's say you're looking for 2 million, well, 200,000. If you're looking for 200,000 Lerato, then you'd say, okay, the request amount that I need is 200,000. Remember, when you are applying for funding, 200,000 here would then have to be tied to your production budget. We spoke about the production budget, and it goes this, simply put, this production budget is like this. So there's the development budget, as well as your production budget, all the way to your pre-production or your post-production budget. So the 200,000 would then be a summarized cost of the first production, how everything is going to cost. Maybe it costs, let's just, then whatever it costs here on the first production, then you then write it down. It should all then encompass, because the first production, okay, there's research, there's development, there's right clearance, there's the writers, there's the script editor, there's travel and accommodation, legal fees, as well as whatever is applicable in your development budget. Then you then write then the total and everything here. So let's just say, for lack of a better amount, then the total for these budgets will be, for the pre-production budgets will be 100,000. Let's say the total is 100,000 for pre-production, and then for all your production needs, the script and developments, the producer, production staff, cast, crew, you enabled all your costs right here. You put them there. It's also, let's say, legal fees as well. You put them all in there, and it's also 100,000, which is the total. We just put this as the total. Total, we'll say it's 100,000, and maybe for post-production, you've got your graphics, your music. Of course, your music has to be licensed. If it's not licensed, then you'd go to then Arctic, or you'd go to websites such as DistroKid to get unlicensed music, or music that is then user-friendly for you to be putting in your entertainment piece. So then let's just say for your production, for your post-production total is, let's say 20,000, right? Let's just say it's 20,000. For your production is 100,000. And for your pre-production is also 100,000. So then the total of all of this would then be 220,000, which goes back to your funding thing. Then you'd write then 220,000. So this 220,000 would then come from your budget that comes from the pre-production, production, as well as your post-production phase. So that the 220,000, is it? Yes, it is. So all these amounts are interlinked. You don't just come up with a number from your head and just put it there. All these numbers have to be calculated intricately, so because they will count them when they consider you as an eligible party for funding. So you start including those things. And it's also necessary that when you account for these amounts, you have a necessary documentation as well as invoices or slips to be able to say, okay, I'm saying equipment is going to cost me 20,000, and here's my quotation as to why I say it's 20,000. If I'm going to have to book the studio is going to be 5,000. So that's why I'm saying it's 5,000. So I've got to prove legitimate receipts of those things. So they will then require those things. And then we go lastly to uploads. These are all the documents that need to be uploaded, right? So the first one would be your 2-page letter of motivation. A letter of motivation is basically why you want to pursue this, who are you, why you believe your entertainment product is worthy and experimental in pursuit of being, how many lives will it change, the social impact, and so forth. It's just basically your letter of motivation. The project synopsis, we spoke about what a synopsis is. Compiled screenplay, you've written a whole screenplay with regards to your document before you actually produce it. So this all comes into the pre-production stage, because the pre-production stage, you need to be having a script that people can actually say, okay, we want to fund this for production, so where's the script? So then the script has to be completed. The visual treatment has to be completed. We spoke about the visual treatment, but we'll get into it at a later stage. Relevant copyright information, if there's any, comprehensive budget, proposal, cash flow, schedule, detailed development and production breakdown, which is what we went through, sales projections from distributors. So as well as as much as it's important, Tenolo, to be able to factor in the costs of making your production, it's also imperative to be able to say, okay, if you finance my project, then this is how much I'll be making from the amount of money that you've given unto me. So I have a deal with Netflix, I have a deal with cinemas, I have a deal with Stay Kinoko, I have a deal with this. So the tickets will cost this X amount. So this is where the money will be then coming from. So it's important to know then the size of the market as well as the industry information in terms of producing your entertainment piece. Your CV, you need to update your CV to say, okay, this is a profile of a person who wants this particular funding. So then pimp your CV, make it look dope. More importantly, contribute and start making meaningful content that we can all be proud for and we can all want to finance at the end of the day. A recent copy of your ID, got your ID as well as the company profile. So then these are all the things that you then need to then be eligible for funding for the Nfvf. It works similarly with all the funding bodies, but it's predominant, and it was very quintessential that I show you how it actually works and so forth. It's actually not that hard. So I encourage you guys to start thinking about it when you start pitching, when you start making your entertainment product or creating your storylines and your posts to be at a professional stage, because these are things that they're going to be requiring. So I want to, since you guys are still on the citizen journalism, it's also your duty to know the market as well. So there are two types of pitches. We've got the standard pitch and the elevator pitch. So the standard pitch is basically a pitch that takes maybe from 15 minutes to 30 minutes. So this is a pitch where you put in all the elements that you want to put in on a page. This is a written form of pitch where when you write the standard pitch, you can actually portray it visually, so you can portray it emotionally. So this is in some cases most most funding bodies would then ask for a standard pitch if you don't have an opportunity for an elevator pitch. An elevator pitch is much briefer. It's like things that would be taking part in class, where you then have 2 minutes or 30 seconds to then pitch your idea as quickly as possible with the log line, as well as the character, as well as the setting. So these are the movie pitches that two types of pitches that you guys will be immersing in. And what I wanted to stress again, remember Lerato, I spoke about the distribution as well as the market in South Africa. So this information that I have here, are you guys still with me? Tenolo?
Yes, sir.
Or you're still following? So it's worthy to know how many films are produced in a country in South Africa a year. It's also worthy to know what is the market share in South African films? How many cinema screens are there in South Africa? How did COVID-19 actually impact in the production phases of the market? So when you start thinking and factoring into a budget, you need to know all these statistics to actually do research by yourselves. Go to Wikipedia and find researchers to say, okay, fine, there are 800 screens in South Africa where I can show my films. In 70 complexes in South Africa. Okay, in 70 complexes, I want to show my film in 40 complexes. That then would count to 400 screens. 400 screens, how much is my ticket going to be for maybe 20 people who I'm targeting to come to my film? That would give me an X amount of, let's say, 50,000, so to speak. So you have this data so that when we ask you questions, or when the investors ask you these kind of questions, then you know. So these are some of the stats that I have personally for myself, but I want you guys to do research on these kind of statistics, as well as the gross domestic products, how film actually shows an economic impact within the country. So as you can see here, total number, how many films are produced in a country in South Africa? A total of 104 locally produced in South Africa, and internationally produced films were released in South Africa between January and September. Okay, you see that in a year, then we are only producing 104 films. Okay, in producing 104 films, we are left with a box office of 126 million. Okay, I mean, you see that, okay, then South Africa needs to grow. These are one of the elements that you can include in your pitches to say, locally, guys, 104 films is not enough for 90 or 88 films that we can be showing our content in. And 126 million is really not enough. So I need funding, because we need more local entrepreneurs into joining the space, into showing these movies, so that we can add into the gross domestic product of our country. So these are the kind of information that I want you guys to be capacitated with, so that you know your facts and so forth. Are you guys still with me?
Yes, sir.
All right, cool, Vab. So I want to show you guys a video with regards to pitching and the styles of pitching. And I want us to discuss this a little bit further before you guys pitch next week on our contact lessons, so that you guys are well capacitated to see how different people pitch for different things and what kind of techniques they actually use to pitch their products. So let me go to this one. Just tell me if you guys can hear and see.
You're on Kickstarter. Yeah. And how much did you ask for? Asked for.
Hold on.
You're on Kickstarter. Yeah. And how much did you ask for?
I think it was $10,000.
And you got to 350.
Yes.
Wow. I was sleeping through the beginning of this presentation because I thought
I'm
you had
glad.
no sales.
I hope you're rested.
I'm awake now. I'm awake now because you have sales, okay? Do you know what it costs you to acquire a customer?
Yeah, the customer acquisition cost, I got a little sheet here just for you,
Yeah.
was $33.
33. And what's the average sale?
The average sale is $148.
What do you make on 140? What's your margin?
Our margin is about like $70.
So you spent 33 to get 70.
Yeah. I mean, that was before COVID. Now, it's
What's it now?
Well, I can't sell it. I'm sold out.
When you sold everything in November, December of last year, when did you actually ship it off?
4 weeks ago. It took forever to get them done.
Have you sold any sheets other than through crowdsourcing?
No, because I didn't have the inventory, and I was worried about making sure I can deliver before I can start taking up more responsibilities.
And the shirts, did we touch on that yet?
Not yet.
Why don't you burn those? Why are you selling t-shirts? You can't make any money doing that.
I might.
What are your sales for the shirts?
So I just released the shirts, co-parent, which is underwear. And so this year we've made $270,000.
And how did you sell those?
On our website.
Your ask is $212,000 for 10%, correct?
Yes.
Why wasn't it 200 or 225? 212.
Do I know the real answer to that question?
Yeah.
No, lie to me.
It's
That's
your
not a great
number,
answer.
I know.
Lie to me.
No, it's because I couldn't say 200 without stuttering. So I had to find a number that I could say without stuttering. Because once I stutter, then the whole thing I'm going to forget. So that's kind of why.
That's a great answer. You're an honest guy, man.
I don't lie. I'm sorry.
So who's running this company with you?
It's just me, myself, in my garage, just hanging out, with my lawn chair.
Great.
Yeah, that's my setup.
I've been there.
Wow. It's a good time. My friends come over.
You're living the life.
I'm actually living it. Like, even being here, this is a great time.
I gotta tell you, when you pulled out the piece of paper and said your customer acquisition cost was $33, how do you know that? Because you haven't sold anything outside of the Kickstarter.
So look at the amount of money I made and then how much it cost an ad spend to get those customers.
But that was on the Kickstarter deal.
Kickstarter is almost like an unreal environment. I want to know, if we started today, how much would it cost you to go get a customer?
Okay, but you realize that the underwear business is different than the t-shirt business, is different than the sheet business.
The thing is, because when people come to me, they're usually campers or like, but I just don't like.
I get it, but you're telling me you're worth close to $2 million, okay?
Yeah.
So I have to try and figure out what is the business. But this deal has no structure yet. I don't care about the underwear and t-shirt business. Returns are horrific. So
I agree, you're right.
I would forget about that. The sheet thing is intriguing, okay? Doing sheets for men with copper infusion to stop them from rotting in their own beds. I love that story. We don't know yet the customer acquisition cost. And so you can't say to me that you're worth close to $2 million. I don't buy it.
I mean, I said it, but it might not be true. I don't know.
Oh my God.
It's one of
Wait, I
those.
want to hang out with you. I want to hang out with you.
I'm just a guy having fun. I'm from Africa, man. Like, I'm gonna tell you, I'm from a village. I'm from a small village. I'm honestly, the fact that I'm here to me is great. This is a great time. I'm so happy to be here. Best pitch ever.
Great, guys. There was a show from Shark Tank. It was an example of pitches. I want you guys to realize actually how this guy actually used humor to stroke the investors into investing into his product. That's one of the things that he used, just a whole lot of humor in terms of homework. He's done a lot of homeworks in terms of the stats and the prices. So it's important to know things from your budget off by head, so that when they say, okay, how much will you be producing? Okay, you need 200K. What is the return on investment if we give you 200K per ticket? So those are some of the things that you need to consider when conceptualizing your idea and when you're pitching it as well. So you need to actually pitch it to yourself. So there are different styles of pitching. You can choose to go the humorous way to kind of stroke people into your specific pitching idea. So it's as much as selling it to people, you need to sell it to yourself. You need to believe it first. So I like the conviction of how that guy actually presented himself, how he kind of influenced people in the room and used humor as well as his facts to actually get people to finance his stuff. I want to show you guys another one so that you can see different styles of pitching as well.
This is Joe Harriman and Lynn Taylor. No Eastman's today, unfortunately. They're all back in the lab.
It's a wonderful facility, but they don't take vacations.
What do they show? Slides of them working?
So have you figured out a way to work the wheel into it?
We know it's hard because wheels aren't really seen as exciting technology, even though they are the original.
Well, technology is a glittering lure. But there's the rare occasion when the public can be engaged on a level beyond flash, if they have a sentimental bond with the product. My first job, I was in-house at a fur company with this old pro copywriter, Greek, named Teddy. And Teddy told me the most important idea in advertising is new. Creates an itch. You simply put your product in there as a kind of calamine lotion. But he also talked about a deeper bond with the product. Nostalgia. It's delicate, but potent. Sweetheart.
Teddy told me that in Greek, nostalgia literally means the pain from an old wound. It's a twinge in your heart, far more powerful than memory alone. This device isn't a spaceship. It's a time machine. It goes backwards, forwards. It takes us to a place where we ache to go again. It's not called the wheel. It's called the carousel. It lets us travel the way a child travels. Round and around, and back home again. A place where we know we are loved.
Good luck at your next meeting.
Great, guys. So that was another page from a different person. Notice how the pitch was so different and how it had certain emotions. And remember how this product then became a revolutionary product into becoming a camera, a video camera, which enables people to travel through time, through pictures and through videos, and that's the emotional bond that your specific audience has with the project. So I want to ask you, Tenolo, what bond does your film have to your audience? Remember, we spoke about the emotion as well as the impact. What bond does a product like a cell phone have to its target market? You know that a cell phone is a personal belonging, and it lets you share your emotions, it lets you write your thoughts down, it lets you capture, it lets you communicate with certain people. What bond does McDonald's as a franchise store have with its consumers or its target medium? What bond does it have? The food, is it delicious? When you think about McDonald's, when you eat those fries, you feel like, I'm loving it. What kind of bond does your entertainment piece have with the product? So it could be emotionally driven, and however you deliver your piece, think about the bond and the social impact as well as the emotion that ties your entertainment piece to your project. So I want to discuss then those elements. What do you think is most different about those two pitches, and what came out the most for you? What came out best for you from those two pitches?
I think what came out best for me, it is the emotional part, because the person that was pitching showed the people that he was pitching to that how his product works and how it captured his life through everything that he's been through.
Exactly.
He used that product. Yes, he used that product, and it showed that it had an impact on other people, because at the almost when the video is ending, there was the other person that walked out, which looked very emotional. So I think that had an impact on him as well when he thinks about his life.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much, Sinolo, for that beautiful input, because that's when you start thinking about your entertainment piece, to think about the emotion, the bond, and how it makes you feel. Notice how the second guy who pitched used himself as he sold the product first to himself, and he used that same time machine to say, look, it can take you through times when you were young, it can take you through times when you are happy, it can take you through times that places you want to be. So he uses emotional relevance to a product, and people respond to emotions, really. And that's what you should start thinking about when you start pitching your idea. Your concept needs to move people in a way that you find like, what, I want to affiliate with this entertainment piece because it makes me a better person, it makes me feel some type of way. So think about, for an example, let's take an example like, let's take Nfvf for an example. If you are funded by the Nfvf to go to school for first, second, up until third year, you are more prone to watch movies that are funded or filmed by the Nfvf because you have a specific bond, because these people put you through school. So that's an emotional aspect of it. I know it's a different kind of example out of context, but it's in context with relation to the bond that you create as a client or as a consumer or as a target audience for that particular project. So when you think about your citizen journalism piece, start thinking about those things. What truths and what emotions do you want to spark from people? And how do you want your presentation to go? Are you going the humorous way? Are you going to go that way? So people should feel one form of emotion. It could be extreme laughter with humor. It could be extreme, like as you mentioned, how the guy even got so emotional and even left the room. So that's how pitches are actually supposed to make us feel. Now, I want us to check out, I think there's a video, since we are here with regarding citizen journalism, there's a video I want to show you. I don't know if I should go through the character treatment with you first, or if I should go through the video of citizen journalism with you. I don't know which one you prefer we go through first, and then we can start discussing that. Let's go to citizen journalism.
Well, everybody.
So this attempt to speak about citizen journalism, Lerato, Tsenolo. I should stop calling you Lerato. Tsenolo, remember how we spoke about citizen journalism and how journalism, when we speak about broadcasting media, how media outlets are used to then convey truth, and how truth should be validated and sourced and so forth, and what is communication in itself. We spoke about how communication could be sharing an idea or making common an idea that is often not common to other people, and globalizing it through media outlets like televisions, as well as radio, as well as broadcasting media. So when we speak about citizen journalism, and we spoke about impartiality, how it's very important to be impartial when you tell a story or when you report a story. By impartiality, if you can still remember, we spoke about two sides of a story, sometimes three sides of a story, sometimes four sides of a story, and then having to validate those truths, or otherwise known as facts. So when we speak about citizen journalism, this video then encompasses so greatly citizen journalism in your entertainment piece that you are set to then produce a 5-minute entertainment thing of Boston. When you go into research and you're going into truth in terms of reporting, in terms of the authoritarian system and communication. So I just want you to watch this video and get a sense of what we actually mean by citizen journalism before we get to the character brief and we wrap up the session, okay? Tenelo?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm saying now I'm going to play you the story with regards to citizen journalism, just to give you a better overview of what it means and what it is exactly.
All right.
I'm here to talk to you about a new way of doing journalism. Some people call this citizen journalism. Other people call it collaborative journalism. But really, it kind of means this. For the journalists, people like me, it means accepting that you can't know everything and allowing other people through technology to be your eyes and your ears. And for people like you, for other members of the public, it can mean not just being the passive consumers of news, but also co-producing news. And I believe this can be a really empowering process. It can enable ordinary people to hold powerful organizations to account. So I'm going to explain this to you today with two cases, two stories that I've investigated, and they both involve controversial deaths. And in both cases, the authorities put out an official version of events which was somewhat misleading. We were able to tell an alternative truth, utilizing new technology, utilizing social media, particularly Twitter. Essentially what I'm talking about here is, as I said, citizen journalism. So to take the first case, this is Ian Tomlinson, man in the foreground. He was a newspaper vendor from London, and on the 1st of April 2009, he died at the G20 protests in London. Now he wasn't a protester, he'd been trying to find his way home from work through the demonstrations, but he didn't get home. He had an encounter with the man behind him, and as you can see, the man behind him has covered his face with a balaclava, and in fact he wasn't showing his badge numbers. But I can tell you now, he was PC Simon Harwood, a police officer with London's Metropolitan Police Force. In fact, he belonged to the elite territorial support group. Now, moments after this image was shot, Harwood struck Tomlinson with a baton and he pushed him to the ground, and Tomlinson died moments later. But that wasn't the story that police wanted us to tell. Initially, through official statements and off-the-record briefings, they said that Ian Tomlinson had died of natural causes. They said that there had been no contact with police, that there were no marks on his body. In fact, they said that when police tried to resuscitate him, that police medics were impeded from doing so because protesters were throwing missiles, believed to be bottles, at police. And the result of that was stories like this. I show you this slide because this was the newspaper that Ian Tomlinson had been selling for 20 years of his life. And if any news organization had an obligation to properly forensically analyze what had been going on, it was the Evening Standard newspaper. But they, like everyone else, including my news organization, were misled by the official version of events put out by police. But you can see here the bottles that were supposedly being thrown at police were turned into bricks by the time.
Sorry, sir. Is this a recording or is this a video? Because I can't see any images.
You can't see anything. It's a video.
I can't see anything.
Let me share my screen with you. I thought my screen was shared with you. Let me just, I'm sorry, Tenolo. I thought you could actually see share screen. Can you see it, Tenolo?
Yes, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry, mate.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm here to talk to you about a new way of doing journalism. Some people call this citizen journalism. Other people call it collaborative journalism. But really, it kind of means this. For the journalists, people like me, it means accepting that you can't know everything and allowing other people through technology to be your eyes and your ears. And for people like you, for other members of the public, it can mean not just being the passive consumers of news, but also co-producing news. And I believe this can be a really empowering process. It can enable ordinary people to hold powerful organizations to account. So I'm going to explain this to you today with two cases, two stories that I've investigated. And they both involve controversial deaths. And in both cases, the authorities put out an official version of events which was somewhat misleading. we were able to tell an alternative truth, utilizing new technology, utilizing social media, particularly Twitter. Essentially, what I'm talking about here is, as I said, citizen journalism. So to take the first case, this is Ian Tomlinson, man in the foreground. He was a newspaper vendor from London, and on the 1st of April 2009, he died at the G20 protests in London. Now, he wasn't a protester, he'd been trying to find his way home from work through the demonstrations, but he didn't get home. He had an encounter with the man behind him, and as you can see, the man behind him has covered his face with a balaclava, and in fact, he wasn't showing his badge numbers. But I can tell you now, he was PC Simon Harwood, a police officer with London's Metropolitan Police Force. In fact, he belonged to the elite territorial support group. Now, moments after this image was shot, Harwood struck Tomlinson with a baton, and he pushed him to the ground, and Tomlinson died moments later. But that wasn't the story that police wanted us to tell. Initially, through official statements and off-the-record briefings, they said that Ian Tomlinson had died of natural causes. They said that there had been no contact with police, that there were no marks on his body. In fact, they said that when police tried to resuscitate him, that police medics were impeded from doing so because protesters were throwing missiles, believed to be bottles, at police. And the result of that was stories like this. I show you this slide because this was the newspaper that Ian Tomlinson had been selling for 20 years of his life. And if any news organization had an obligation to properly forensically analyze what had been going on, it was the Evening Standard newspaper. But they, like everyone else, including my news organization, were misled by the official version of events put out by police. But you can see here the bottles that were supposedly being thrown at police were turned into bricks by the time they reached this edition of the newspaper. So we were suspicious and we wanted to see if there was more to the story. We needed to find those protesters that you can see in the image. Of course, they had vanished by the time we started investigating. So how do you find the witnesses? And this is what, for me, where it got really interesting. We turned to the internet. Now, this is Twitter. We've heard a lot about it today. Essentially, for me, when I began investigating this case, I was completely new to this. I'd signed up 2 days earlier. And I discovered that Twitter was a microblogging site. It enabled me to send out short 140 character messages, also an amazing search facility. But it was a social arena in which other people were gathering with a common motive. And it is, in this case, independently of journalists, people themselves were interrogating exactly what had happened to Ian Tomlinson in his last 30 minutes alive. Individuals like these two guys. So they went to Ian Tomlinson's aid after he collapsed. They phoned the ambulance. They didn't see any bottles, they didn't see any bricks. So they were concerned that the stories weren't quite as accurate as police were claiming them to be. And again, through social media, we started encountering individuals with material like this, photographs, evidence. Now, this does not show the attack on Ian Tomlinson, but he appears to be in some distress. Was he drunk? Did he fall over? Did this have anything to do with the police officers next to him? Here he appears to be talking to them. For us, this was enough to investigate further, to dig deeper. The result was putting out stories ourselves. Now, one of the most amazing things about the internet is the information that people put out is freely available to anyone, as we all know. But that doesn't just go for citizen journalists. That doesn't just go for people putting out messages on Facebook or Twitter. That goes for journalists themselves, people like me. As long as your news is the right side of a paywall, i.e. it's free, anybody can access it. And stories like these, which were questioning the official version of events, which were skeptical in tone, allowed people to realize that we had questions ourselves. They were online magnets. Individuals with material that could help us were drawn toward us by some kind of gravitational force. And after 6 days, we managed to track down around 20 witnesses. And we've plotted them here on the map. This is the scene of Ian Tomlinson's death, the Bank of England in London, and each of these witnesses that we plotted on the map, you could click on these small bullet points, and you could hear what they had to say, see their photographic image, and at times see their videographic images as well. But still, at this stage, with witnesses telling us that they'd seen police attack Ian Tomlinson before his death, still, police refused to accept that. There was no official investigation into his death. And then something changed. I got an email from an investment fund manager in New York. On the day of Ian Tomlinson's death, he'd been in London on business, and he'd taken out his digital camera and he'd recorded this. This is the crowd at the G20 protest on April the 1st around 7:20 p.m. They are on a corner near the Bank Arena. This footage will form the basis of the police investigation into the death of this man. Ian Tomlinson was walking through this area, attempting to get home from work. We slowed down footage to show how it poses serious questions about police conduct. Ian Tomlinson had his back to riot officers and dog handlers and was walking away from them. He had his hands in his pockets. Here, the riot officer appears to strike Tomlinson's leg area with a baton. He then lunges at Tomlinson from behind. Tomlinson is propelled forward and hits the floor. Okay, so shocking stuff. That video wasn't playing too well, but when I first watched the video for myself, I mean, I've been in touch with this investment fund manager in New York, and I'd become obsessed with this story. I've spoken to so many people who'd said they'd seen this happen, and the guy on the other end of the phone was saying, "Look, the video shows it." But I didn't want to believe him until I actually saw it for myself. And it's 2 o'clock in the morning. I was there with an IT guy. The video wasn't coming. It wasn't working. And then finally it landed, and I clicked on it. And I just realized this is really something quite significant. And within 15 hours, we put it on our website. The first thing police did was they came to our office, senior officers came to our office and asked us to take the video down. We said no. It would have been too late anyway, of course, because it had traveled around the world. And the officer in that film, in 2 days' time, will appear before an inquest jury in London. And they have the power to decide that Ian Tomlinson was unlawfully killed. So that's the first case. So 2 cases today. The second case is this man. Now, like Ian Tomlinson, he was a father. He lived in London, but he was a political refugee, okay, from Angola. And 6 months ago, the British government decided they wanted to return him to Angola. He was a failed asylum seeker. So they booked him a seat on an airline, okay, a flight from Heathrow. Now, the official version of events, the official explanation of Jimmy Mabenga's death was simply that he'd taken ill. He'd become unwell on the flight, the plane had returned to Heathrow, and then he was transferred to hospital and pronounced dead. Now, what actually happened to Jimmy Mabenga, the story that we were able to tell my colleague Matthew Taylor and I, was that actually 3 security guards began trying to restrain him in his seat. He was resisting his deportation. They were restraining him in his seat. They placed him in a dangerous hold. It keeps detainees quiet. He was making a lot of noise, but it can also lead to positional asphyxia, a form of suffocation. So you have to imagine here that there were other passengers on the plane, and they could hear him saying, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe. They're killing me." And then he stopped breathing. So how did we find these passengers? In the case of Ian Tomlinson, the witnesses were still in London, but these passengers, many of them, had returned to Angola. How are we going to find them? Well, again, we turned to the internet, and we wrote, as I said before, stories. They're online magnets. The tone of some of these stories, journalism professors might frown upon because they were skeptical. They were asking questions, perhaps speculative, maybe the kind of things that journalists shouldn't do. But we needed to do it, and we needed to use Twitter also. Here I'm saying an Angolan man dies on a flight. The story could be big, a level of speculation. This next tweet says, "Please RT." That means please retweet. Please pass down the chain. And one of the fascinating things about Twitter is that the pattern of flow of information is unlike anything we've ever seen before. We don't really understand it, but once you let go of a piece of information, it travels like wind. You can't determine where it ends up. But strangely, tweets have an uncanny ability to reach their intended destination. And in this case, it was this man. He says, "I was also there on BA 77, that's the flight number, and the man was begging for help, and I now feel so guilty that I did nothing." Now, this was Michael. He was on an Angolan oil field when he sent me this tweet. I was in my office in London. He had concerns about what happened on the flight. He'd gone onto his laptop, he typed in the flight number, he'd encountered that tweet, he'd encountered our stories, he realized we had an intention to tell a different version of events. We were skeptical, and he contacted me. And this is what Michael said.
Well, I'm pretty sure it's the time of the last thing we heard from him was he couldn't breathe. And you got 3 security guards, and each one of them looked like 100 kilo plus. You know, bearing down on him, hauling him from what I could see below the seats. But I saw the 3 men trying to pull him down below the seats. And all I could see was his head sticking up above the seats. And, you know, he was hollering out, you know, help me. And he just kept saying, help me, help me. And then he disappeared below the seats. And you can see the 3 security guards sitting on top of him from there. For the rest of my life, okay, I'm always going to have that in the back of my mind that I have done something that's going to bother me every time I lay down and go to sleep now. Wow, I didn't get involved because I was scared I might get kicked off the flight and lose my job. If it takes 3 men to hold a man down to put him on a flight when the public is on, that's excessive. Okay, if the man died, okay, that right there is excessive.
So that was his interpretation of what had happened on the flight. And Michael was actually one of 5 witnesses that we eventually managed to track down, most of them, as I said, through the internet, through social media. And we could actually place them on the plane so you could see exactly where they were sat. And I should say at this stage that one really important dimension to all of this for journalists who utilize social media and who utilize citizen journalism is making sure we get our facts correct. And verification is absolutely essential. So in the case of the Ian Tomlinson witnesses, I got them to return to the scene of the death and physically walk me through and tell me exactly what they had seen. That was absolutely essential. In the case of Mbenga, of course, we couldn't do that, but they could send us their boarding passes and we could interrogate what they were saying and ensure it was consistent with what other passengers were saying too. The danger in all of this for journalists, for all of us, is that we're victims of hoaxes or that there's deliberate misinformation fed into the public domain. So we have to be careful. But nobody can deny the power of citizen journalism. When a plane crashes into the Hudson 2 years ago and the world finds out about this because a man is on a nearby ferry, he takes out his iPhone and he photographs the image of the plane and sends it around the world. And that's how most people found out initially in the early minutes and hours about the plane in the Hudson River. And think of the 2 biggest news stories of the year. Okay, we had the Japanese earthquake and the tsunami. And cast your mind's eye back to the images that you saw on your television screens. They were, you know, boats left 5 miles inland. They were houses being moved along as if in the sea. You know, water lifting up inside people's living rooms, supermarkets shaking. These were images shot by citizen journalists and instantly shared on the internet. And the other big story of the year, the political crisis, the political earthquake in the Middle East. And it doesn't matter if it was Egypt or Libya or Syria or Yemen. Individuals have managed to overcome the repressive restrictions in those regimes by recording their environment and telling their own stories on the internet. Again, always very difficult to verify, but potentially a huge layer of accountability. This image, and I could have shown you any actually, I mean, YouTube is full of them. This image is of a apparently unarmed protester in Bahrain, and he's being shot by security forces. It doesn't matter if the individual being mistreated, possibly even killed, is in Bahrain or in London, but citizen journalism and this technology has inserted a new layer of accountability into our world. And I think that's a good thing. So to conclude the theme of the conference, why not? I think for journalists, it's quite simple, really. I mean, why not utilize this technology, which massively broadens the boundaries of what's possible, except that many of the things that happen in our world now go recorded, and we can obtain that information through social media. That's new for journalists. The stories I showed you, I don't think we would have been able to investigate 10 years ago, possibly even 5 years ago. I think there's a very good argument to say that the two deaths, the death of Ian Tomlinson and the death of Jimmy Mabenga, we still today wouldn't know exactly what happened in those cases. And why not for people like yourselves? Well, I think that's very simple too. If you encounter something that you believe is problematic, that disturbs you, that concerns you, an injustice of some kind, something that doesn't feel quite right, then why not witness it, record it, and share it? That process of witnessing, recording, and sharing is journalism, and we can all do it. So thank you.
Thank you, Tsenolo, for paying attention to what citizen journalism. I hope that you have a broader understanding of what citizen journalism is more about, especially when it comes to impartiality and truth seeking, because at the end of the day, journalism is about truth seeking and verification. So as the man mentioned, there's so many outlets to then expose truth and pursue stories that are actually worth telling. So I really encourage you to start thinking along those lines of stories that you want to tell, stories that you believe are at the depth of your heart, and then aggressively then start venturing into looking at social media and as a platform for being able to validate these stories as a source of data, as a source of information, because really the possibilities are endless, you know, because if you look at social media, if you look at Facebook, if you look at Twitter, they're actually almost as bigger than radio, bigger than television, and in the not so distant future, they could be then easily been taken forth as mass media platforms. So why don't we use these platforms to investigate stories and actually tell the truth about these stories? So these are things and the elements that I want you to actually pursue in your entertainment pieces, and understanding what citizen journalism is as a truth seeker, as a reporter, as a storyteller, to tell the stories and honor them truthfully, so with evidence and with facts and with people that want to come forth. But I want to pose a question to you, Tsenolo. What do you feel like is the most interesting about citizen journalism that you feel like you'd want to express?
I think citizen journalism is as simple. I thought it was kind of difficult because I thought you needed certain resources in order for you to perform it. But as he said, you need to just witness anything that you can witness, and you record it and you share it on social media platforms. So I think that's the best way to describe it. Citizen journalism. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Lerato. I think then we'll then deal deeper into the script tomorrow, on tomorrow's lesson, as well as the formatting, as well as the character breakdown. Okay. But I genuinely appreciate this class. I appreciate your participation, and thank you for your participation and your divinity. I'll see you then tomorrow at tomorrow's class. All right, bye.
Bye.